Hello everyone and welcome back to another video, and today we have finally gotten the chance to watch Zack Snyder's Justice League, and I actually got the opportunity to watch it in theaters. Perk of working at a movie theater, by the way, which the perks have never been better than it was today. I've been waiting for this movie for so very long, and unlike every single other review under the sun for this movie, I will not, or at least really trying to not compare it to the 2017 Justice League, and just review this movie on its own merits, review this movie with the movie itself, on its own experience, on its own things that it does, what it does well, what it doesn't do well, not comparing it to what it does better, because obviously this version is better than the previous one. So just by saying that, it doesn't mean that this movie is necessarily good right off the bat, but I am very happy to say that I loved this movie. All 4 hours, but almost all 4 hours of this entire extremely long runtime, which I think that is probably going to be the main negative for a lot of people. But that being said, this movie flows, it builds, and the characters and the ending and pretty much everything about it I was a huge fan of. And this is going to be a massive spoiler review, so I'm going to be talking about everything that I possibly can in this one video. If I forget one thing here or there, comment down below. Let me know what you guys thought or have any questions of what my thoughts were on specific things in the movie. I'm very curious of what you guys also think of this film, so definitely comment down below, leave a like, and subscribe, because I have had a bunch of reviews for all these different DC movies just over the past few weeks. I have reviews up from Man of Steel to this now. I even reviewed Justice League last week or just a few days ago, and I even have reviews up all the way from this to, I believe, Birds of Prey is the most recent one, or Wonder Woman 1984. I have reviews for every single DCEU movie, so I have a lot of stuff. I'll leave a playlist in the links in that card over there. So here we go, Zack Snyder's Justice League. Let's dive right into this thing, and the way I'm going to review this is basically by going through each character and an overall story at the end of it, because this will kind of lead it into my positives to negatives, because I think the thing that I love most about this movie is the fleshing out of the characters. And we'll start off with the new characters, actually. I would want to start off with the original three, the main three that we got in Batman vs. Superman, being Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, but I really think that those three characters are kind of pushed on the wayside for the new characters to be introduced, because I said this way before this movie was originally released in 2017, that you don't need to have the Marvel format to have your Avengers big team up movie. You don't have to have your solo movies beforehand. Yes, it worked very well for the Avengers to have that movie be in a very condensed format, being like 2 hours, whatever minutes that movie was, but this film has the opportunity with its length to introduce these characters, and you didn't need those things. I've been clamoring for that this entire time, that you don't need all these solo movies before this one to tell a great story with these characters, and I think that's what this movie does phenomenally. First off, I want to talk about Ray Fisher as Cyborg, and his entire journey throughout all of this is just so telling of why he was so desperate to get this movie released, because this is a star-making performance from Ray Fisher, and the character in this entire film, he is, I mean, Zack Snyder has said it over and over and over again, that Ray Fisher really is the heart and soul of this movie, and that is 100% true. That could not be, there's nothing further from the truth than the fact that Ray Fisher's story in this movie is integral to the entire plots and to the entire heart of the entire thing. In so many ways, this is the Cyborg origin story. It goes over the accident that he had that killed his mother, that he was pretty much going to die for if his father didn't merge him with the mother box, and it created his cybernetic, I guess he's basically a cyber god. That's what he is, and that introduction of who he is, the powers that he has, and what he could do with these powers. Like his father explains in this recording tape that he can launch every single nuclear missile on the entire planet at the same moment at a single target if he wanted to, if he even dared, and it wouldn't even be difficult. He can do it in a blink of an eye. But it's what you do with these powers and how you react to them and what you do and who you are as a person that really defines what this character will end up doing. And that's why I thought they did brilliantly with Cyborg in this movie. And it showed him from his beginning of kind of being more, I don't want to say angsty, but being like in the corner in the shadows, having his hood up, not wanting to go outside and being a recluse because he doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know what he is anymore. And so you get that tape recording from his father of talking about his powers through a scientific, perspective. And before he goes into as his father, like his connection, his personal connection with being his father at the end of the tape. And I thought that was all beautifully done from beginning to end, of how he crushed that tape and then ended up listening to it and fixing fixing at the end of the movie, and he hears all these things, and how even without hearing those specifically, he still followed those words because his father was right about him as a person, and about believing in him and trusting him with these abilities and these powers, because the DC characters, unlike Marvel, really are gods, and this was a pure example of a cybernetic god, essentially, with Cyborg. And this is a very, very fascinating character, and I really hope that Warner Brothers gets their shit together and gives this guy a shot to do this character one more time in either his own movie, or put him back in the Flash, or do whatever. Maybe make your Justice League 2 and 3 like you were originally planning to. Let Zack Snyder do his thing, because this character and Ray Fisher as this character was phenomenal, and I cannot go without seeing him as this character again. Next up, I want to talk about Ezra Miller's Flash. And before we get into the whole Ezra Miller thing, I'm not sure what that entire situation is, and I hope that's all explained. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, that doesn't really matter for I guess this review in particular. But in terms of his performance, in terms of his character, especially, I was going to say compared to the other version, but his character in this movie was very, very good. And this is what I was wanting from The Flash in this entire, DC universe. Is I loved the TV show back in whenever that first season came out. That first season of The Flash, and even 2 and 3 are so phenomenal, but especially season 1 and how it explores Barry, and how it explores the first time that he learns to time travel and all these different things. And this movie has Barry and the Flash and using the Speed Force and using all these different abilities in a way that I've been wanting them to use this character in the film universe. Because yes, you have a much more massive budget to have the Flash do incredible things, and you get that in this movie. This is what I've been wanting to see from a speedster on screen. Yes, we got the Quicksilvers in the past from Marvel, and those scenes are phenomenal in the X-Men movies with Evan Peters, but this is the stuff that the Flash can do that makes this character much more interesting than Quicksilver. This is the idea of the Speed Force, essentially, and that was utilized in this movie. He wasn't running around in circles doing nothing in the ending of this movie. Again, I'm struggling to not compare it once again, but he has so much purpose at the end of this film, and that conversation that he has with his father about making your own future, and how he takes that at the end of the film, and he's running, and he needs to get to a certain speed, and he needs to be able to supercharge the mother boxes in order for Cyborg to separate them. And he gets shot, and he gets fallen down, and he can't heal in time, and everything goes wrong. The unity happens, and the planet starts exploding, and then he just starts booking it. And as he steps, the world is rebuilt behind him as he's reversing time. This visualization of the Speed Force, I think, was phenomenal. Yes, I like the yellow lightning from the Flash TV show, but this blue lightning and the idea that Zack Snyder had for this character in this film really, really works in this version. And yes, I actually really enjoyed the iris scene that was in this movie. It's just one little quick thing, and it could be contained. I do think if you were cut anything from this movie, I do think that could have been cut and could have been a really, really awesome, deleted scene in the bonus features of the Blu-ray. But with that scene being in this movie, it's a phenomenal showcase of this character and his abilities and who he is as a person, saving this random person who he sees getting in this accident, and that immediate connection that they have with each other, I think, was really well done. It was a beautifully shot scene as well. And that entire thing with Ezra Miller and his father and how that's all set up, I am devastated that Billy Crudup is not going to be in the Flash movie, leaving for whatever reason, because his performance in this, when he's telling Barry to basically give up on him and not to visit him anymore because he needs to focus on his life and needs to get his life together, was very, very potent. So this movie, I thought, did the Flash in the way that I've been wanting to see the Flash done on the big screen for so very long. So I was very happy with what they did with this character. And when it comes to Aquaman as well, I think they set up the Aquaman movie retrospectively through this in a very, very great way. It really does. Like, by the end of the film, he's going to see his father, which is where the Aquaman movie kicks off, essentially. So I do think, Mara wasn't British in the Aquaman movie, which I think is one little weird thing. And this bubbles of speaking there's some things that are not really continuing through the Aquaman movie that's a little bit off, but that doesn't matter because this character, I think, is very entertaining. And the moments that you get to see of him riding the parademon down through that building, and his just charisma as this character is still there, and he is badass swimming and just kicking ass underwater, and that whole sequence with the Atlanteans protecting their mother box, which I will also get into that when I get to the Wonder Woman section of whenever they're protecting the mother boxes. they are so much more just intense. Those scenes, there's stakes behind them, stakes behind losing these things. And when he's fighting for or against Steppenwolf to protect that box, it is such an intense scene. And to see him showcase his powers, again, not as cool as we got to see later in his Aquaman movie, but as a setup for that character, I do think that this movie does springboard off of Aquaman very, very well. And of course, you have Wonder Woman being one of my favorite characters in DC. Obviously, I have my poster up there, and although Wonder Woman 1984 isn't the most amazing movie, I did enjoy it, but the original Wonder Woman movie, as I just reviewed a few days ago, is phenomenal, and this movie continues that very well. And I think Wonder Woman in this movie is kind of pushed to the wayside. I think she is badass in the action sequences, and they give her a lot to do in those aspects of it. But in terms of the Diana Prince aspect, she helps Bruce Wayne recruit, Cyborg and a couple other things, and she has some great moments in the film where, she's fighting off that hostage situation at the beginning of the movie with those terrorists. That scene is awesome and brutal. Talk about the R rating for this movie. That scene with Wonder Woman introducing her into this film was awesome, and that's what I've been wanting to see from Wonder Woman in the DC universe, in her own movies, is seeing her in modern times fighting against modern threats. That is something that I'm really interested in, and seeing her fight a grand threat as powerful as Steppenwolf and as threatening as him was so cool to see, because of how great he is as a villain, which I'll get into in a minute here. But because of that, seeing her fight this threat was very, very entertaining. I said that in my Wonder Woman review, is I wanted to see her fight a villain that can really match her and is really threatening, and this movie gave it to me. Alright, now we have gotten to Batman, and again, these last three parts are kind of pushed into the wayside because the focus was more so on the other characters, and I'll be honest, I'm really not sure if Batman actually suits up until like 2 hours into the movie, which is kind of insane. But before you freak out about that, if you have not seen the movie and you're somehow watching a spoiler review, the way that they handle Bruce Wayne in this film, I thought was phenomenal. I love his character in this film because, yes, in Batman vs. Superman, you get to see this different, hardened Batman that we never really got to see in the Dark Knight movies or in any of the other 80s and 90s Batman movies. This was very different for this character, and to see this version of Bruce Wayne really dealing with the guilt of what he did with Superman and how he really screwed the world by setting up that entire situation that led to the death of Superman, and his guilt and his needing to become a leader because of these dreams that he's having was very, very good in this movie. I thought he was a fantastic leader. He has a few great speeches, but the entire idea that, he's just a man, he's immortal next to all these gods. But the thing is, the team itself can do without Batman in the action sequences, I guess, but they cannot do without him in terms of holding the team together and bringing them together in this film. And the way that they did it, he is extremely necessary. He is necessary for them to become a team by the ending of the film. And yes, they have problems along the way of, they try to make a plan, and then Cyborg acts emotionally because his father is in danger, and he jumps in, and the Wonder Woman jumps in, and the Flash jumps in separately, and Batman jumps in, and there's no plan for any of that. Even though he was trying to set up a plan with Wonder Woman, it just didn't go well in that first main action sequence 2 hours into the movie, which, yeah, the first main action sequence 2 hours into the movie, but you had the other mother box sequences. But it's fine. It's fine. We'll talk about that in terms of the plot of everything. But with the Batman thing, yes, you get some awesome Batman moments towards the end of the movie, but it takes a while to get those things. So in terms of Batman, I think he is kind of lacking in this movie. He has a great Batmobile sequence that was phenomenal at the ending of the film. I loved every second of that. That was awesome. That's some Batman action that we've never gotten before. I've seen Batman take on these more grand threats instead of more grounded, realistic threats. Watching him with this Batmobile take these things out was really cool to see. And even when he's fighting the parademons hand-to-hand combat style, I think that really worked towards the end of the film. But the Bruce Wayne aspect is what I was most interested in his character in this movie. And I thought the leadership that he had and the character that he had was really solid. And then we get to, of course, Superman, which is the whole revival storyline in this movie, which, again, I'm going to start to just briefly compare it to the previous version, which the best parts of that movie was a lot of the things that you see in the Snyder Cut were just, those were the best moments. The stuff that they kept from Snyder's stuff were the best moments in the original theatrical cuts. And that scene where Superman is first revived and him fighting the Justice League, that is in this movie and is even more epic than it was in the theatrical one. Every single moment in this one just hit harder with the revival of Superman. And one of my favorite, probably my favorite scene in the entire movie was that sequence where they're sitting around that table looking at the mother box and trying to discover what its power is and what it can do and how it could possibly bring something to life. And it all leads to them thinking that same idea. And the Flash has a great line of being like, I don't want to be the one to say it, but I think we're all thinking the same thing. And yes, they're thinking about the revival of Superman. And that entire sequence when you see Ray Fisher's Cyborg put up that hologram of Superman and you get that visual that was in the original Superman or the original Justice League trailer that we never got in the movie, that is one that gave me chills. That entire sequence gave me chills, and the whole bringing back of Superman felt more grand because it built up to it. You got to see this team try to form and struggle to be led by Batman and to be doing all these things, and you get this idea, this possibility, this inkling that Superman could return. And this build up to it, and them questioning whether or not it's a good idea. And then Cyborg gets that vision of the future of bringing back Superman, which is a whole other consequence behind all of it, which gets extremely interesting when it comes to the future of these movies potentially. But then they revive him. Flash runs, and he actually, it's awesome. You get the mother boxes starting to dip in the water, and the Flash is running so fast that he starts to rewind the time so it gets to that perfect point where he can touch it and give it the spark it needs to revive Superman. And it's such a fantastic visual sequence. That entire thing is beautifully shot. And then, of course, we get Superman revived, and you get that fight that is, again, many more shots and many more instances where, like, Flash and Aquaman are trying to stop Superman as he's walking down towards Batman, which is another terrifying thing. Batman can't do anything. He knows the consequence. He sees this guy coming towards him, and honestly, you look at his expression, you look at his face, and you know he honestly feels like he deserves it, which is another great thing with Bruce Wayne and his guilt and all that he's done with his character in this movie was really, really awesome. And then you get everything with Lois Lane, which I think this movie does a great job at setting the devastation of the loss of Superman that we got from Batman vs. Superman, because he doesn't really show up for, I think, 2.5 hours into this movie. In those first 2.5 hours, you feel the lack of Superman, and you feel his presence being gone because the world really is devastated by his loss. Lois Lane is devastated by his loss. Diane, or not Diane Lane, that's the actress. Martha Kent is devastated by the loss of her son, and you get to feel that in this version of the movie. And it all so perfectly builds to his revival and him going back to the farm and learning back his memories and talking to Lois and saying that I have a second chance. And this is what I was talking about in my Man of Steel review and my Batman vs. Superman review was I never really liked the character of Superman until Man of Steel. It really humanized him for me, and it gave him such conflict in terms of whether or not he wants to reveal himself to the world, and that ideology from his father, or from the Kent's father, from Jor-El, and these two different ideologies of whether or not he should show himself to the world and how he should present himself in front of humanity, and all these different ideas that is presented in Man of Steel that is carried through to Batman vs. Superman, and all the controversy around him of him being set up and framed for doing all these terrible things, and he gets more and more demotivated to, I guess, be the hero that he knows he can be. And in this film, or by the end of Batman vs. Superman, he chooses that this is his world and he will defend it no matter the cost, sacrificing himself. And so what I was hoping for this movie to do is really satisfy the ending of that arc and bring him back, and knowing that he has a second chance and that he won't waste it. That was such a beautiful line. Again, beautifully shot and all of that, of course, beautifully written. And this character walking down and getting his suit, and the music, the way they use the Man of Steel Hans Zimmer theme throughout this movie was phenomenal, because it's one of my favorite scores of all time. And seeing him take that first flight once again with the black suit, looking awesome. I loved every second of Superman in this movie, especially when it comes to the ending where he just slaps Steppenwolf around like he is nothing. And the parts where he first shows up and Steppenwolf is swinging down his axe to take down Cyborg, and he just flies in and it hits his shoulder and just kind of bounces off, and he just turns his head slightly and freezes the entire thing and then breaks it. That is incredible. That is some of the best Superman visuals I've ever seen, and some of the action that he has fighting and just kicking, whooping Steppenwolf around like he's a ragdoll was phenomenal. And the teamwork that they all had with, I think it was Aquaman, or no, I think it was Wonder Woman hit him across the area with her gauntlets, and then Aquaman flew in and smacked him down through the other way, and then Superman went down, did the finishing punch on him. That was awesome. The Superman action in this and the teamwork with all three of them was really, really satisfying. And then, of course, you have Steppenwolf and the main plot of this movie, which is where I will get into some of the negatives of this film. I think this movie, the plot really still is a character trying to gather 3 boxes, and there's only so much you can do with that plot. However, Steppenwolf was a much more threatening and much more understandable villain of how he was basically exiled by Darkseid from his home world because of a betrayal, and he's basically punished managed to gather 50,000 worlds for Darkseid, and when he finally gets those 50,000, he finally even just get to look at Darkseid and be in his presence again, and how this means so much to Steppenwolf, and he's just a soldier that is put on a path, a war path, to get this planet, and he needs it. You feel like he needs this planet. He's threatening, and he's cutting people's heads off. He's slicing them in half. He's just destroying people. You get the scenes in Themyscira with the entire Amazonians fighting and protecting their mother box, and that sequence was awesome. One of my favorite things in the theatrical, but in this one, my God, it is so perfect. I love that entire sequence in this movie. And then, of course, you get the Atlantean one, which I already talked about with Aquaman, and that action, and just even little moments where he's talking to these people and like threatening them, using his little spider thing to get information from these different Atlanteans, and he's like just tossing them around and being just completely brutal. You feel the force of this guy, especially in the first action sequence where the Justice League first forms and they're still without Superman, and they go in and they're fighting him. That entire action sequence works so much better because you feel the threats from this guy. You feel the stakes behind it because of this looming presence of Darkseid, which I do love the implementation of Darkseid in this version of the movie. I think it is done very well, and I do have concerns about the future of this if they do decide to go on, because from what it looks like right now, Darkseid, all he wants is this one algorithm thing, like the anti-life algorithm or whatever it is that happens to be on Earth, and how, I guess, it's more of a grudge thing. He wasn't able to get Earth before when he came down and was defeated by the gods, the Amazonians, and the Atlanteans, and then the group of men that fought for the planets back in that flashback, which was incredible. You get to see Green Lantern, all these different things, fighting Darkseid, and he gets beat up. He gets hit with that axe. He gets zapped and torn apart and dragged back into his ship and flying away. And you can kind of tell that his grudge of getting this world is there, and so maybe that is his motivations, but he doesn't seem as clear cut as something like a Thanos. So I'm not sure how they would develop him as a villain, which hopefully they would do that really well. I think this is kind of akin to Ronan in Guardians of the Galaxy, and how Ronan was kind of a foot soldier for Thanos, but I would say Steppenwolf is a million times better than Ronan because of that debt and because of that desperation of him wanting to make that connection back to his lord, to his savior, to somebody that he looks up to, that he betrayed and had that relationship with, that he lost. And a 50,000 world debt is kind of insane. But in terms of negatives, that's really it. Yes, the story is wrapping around 3 boxes that they have to collect, but the characters behind it, with the Justice League actually forming and with a really solid villain, I do think that fairly thin plot does work fairly well in this movie with what they have and how epic the story feels, and how this does at times feel like the Lord of the Rings for DC, which is kind of awesome. But I guess my only other negative is the length. The first 2 hours feel very, I don't want to say disjointed. It feels like you're kind of bouncing between different things, and it does feel like a miniseries at first. For the first 2 hours, it feels like, okay, this is like the Cyborg centric episode, or the chapters really feel like chapters more so in the first half of it, those 3 chapters that are in those. And I think you feel the runtime for that first 2 hours. But as soon as they form and they talk to J.K. Simmons and they get together and they go for that first, action sequence as a team, from there on out, the movie has a sprint to the finish. It is moving like a freight train, and it is awesome. I think the first 2 hours suffers a little bit from pacing in terms of that. However, every second of that is worth it by the payoff at the end with them fighting together as a team, and everything that you learn about their characters and everything that you learn about Bruce Wayne trying to bring them all together is worth it by the end of the film. Alright, and before I wrap up this video, I want to talk about the nightmare sequence at the end of the film and the epilogue in general. I think the movie wrapped up very well. You get our hero shots of all of them that, again, much more earned than the theatrical one, which, yes, I mentioned the theatrical again. Just delete it from my mind. Somebody what's the thing from Men in Black, the neuralizer, whatever it is, to just erase my memory? Somebody erase that movie from my mind, please. But we have the epilogue of this film. The characters are wrapped up in very similar places as they were in the theatrical. You have Batman and Wonder Woman thinking about forming the Justice League in the Wayne Manor mansion of the 6 seats at the table. You get Superman on the streets, doing his Superman things. You get the Flash running through Central City, being the hero of that. You get Aquaman going off and doing his thing. And you get Cyborg learning his powers and embracing his powers. And after the loss of both of his parents and how tragic his backstory is, to see him embracing who he is by the end of the film is awesome. But then you get Bruce Wayne having yet another nightmare scene. And this entire nightmare scene works so much better so much better than it did in Batman vs Superman, because that's one of my biggest problems of Batman vs Superman. I thought that sequence just did not fit into that movie whatsoever, and I do think that this fleshes that entire idea out so much better. You get to see, I think it's Mara, you get Deathstroke, you get Batman, and then the Flash, Cyborg, and then the Joker. I think those are the 6 who are there in the Nightmare sequence. That is, I guess, the new team that has formed after the world has gone to hell, and Darkseid has done whatever to the world, and Lois Lane has died, and you get all these flashes of, I think Wonder Woman has died. You get a flash of course, Lois Lane dying, which leads to Superman basically snapping and being taken over with the anti-life algorithm from Darkseid and being turned evil, which is why you get that evil Superman scene inside of Batman vs Superman and that like premonition thing, and that ties in the whole thing of the Flash time travel thing in Batman vs Superman. That just makes more sense now because you have a cohesive line from that movie to this movie, because this movie really does start off exactly where Batman vs Superman ends, and it has a cohesive line. You can watch Man of Steel and then it ends, and then Batman vs Superman picks up and you get to see that destruction of Metropolis, and then this movie and that movie ends with the death of Superman, and this one starts with the death of Superman and just moves. So those 3 films are so cohesive together. But then by the time you get to this Nightmare sequence and you see these characters interact with each other, and then the Batman and Joker stuff, that conversation that they have, and yes, Jared Leto's Joker I did not really like too much, and I thought he had potential, but just his performance I didn't like in Suicide Squad, which you can watch my review for that as well in the card up here. But that just didn't work for me in that version. But in here, I think he is a lot better. And that conversation that Batman has with the Joker about Robin, and that threatening vibe that is in that entire conversation of that, just Batman being like, you better watch your words very carefully. And you feel the Joker and feel that alliance that they're trying to form and how they need each other, but they hate each other so much is perfect. I love that. I think Zack Snyder did a really good job with cult leader Jared Leto as this character, which that's a whole other thing. But besides that whole other aspect of it, I really did like Jared Leto in this movie. I thought his scene, although it doesn't really have anything to do with this movie itself, it is set up for something that goes on forwards, which I really hope we do get, but I liked what they did with him. And this entire sequence ends really well with the build-up of seeing Superman fly down and this new team that has formed getting ready to fight Superman. And man, does this movie make me want so many things. For one, you get that whole Jesse Eisenberg thing with Deathstroke, and that entire sequence actually works better because it really does set up the Ben Affleck Batman movie and how apparently there's a personal vendetta against Deathstroke and Batman, and the fact that Deathstroke learns that Batman is Bruce Wayne in that scene really is telling for what that movie could have been, how brutal and how intense this Deathstroke movie or this Ben Affleck Batman movie with Deathstroke as a villain could have been. And I think this movie does a great job at 2 things. One, having the Justice League form in a very meaningful way with great characters and all of that I already mentioned, but also does a great job at setting up things for the future in a not so pandering way. Like a lot of movies, I will say Age of Ultron does this a lot, where there's a lot of scenes in that movie, like you have Aquaman, or not Aquaman, jeez. You have Thor in that like water pool being zapped by lightning and freaking out, or whatever that entire scene was. You get stuff in this movie that sets up the future that isn't just really weird and random. You get this build up for this possible Justice League 2 and 3 that makes you really want to see what Darkseid is and his entire deal and what the Justice League can do against that. And this whole nightmare sequence leading up to that. What does all this mean? What does all this time travel with the Flash mean? How can they do all this? But not just that, but the Batman movie, how that's set up is very, very intriguing. And I want to see the Flash fight the Reverse Flash. I really, really want to see that storyline in a Flash movie with these visuals, and that's, I guess, visualization of the Speed Force is very, very fascinating of how they can pull off that story. And it just makes me want to see all these things. A Cyborg movie. It makes me want a Cyborg movie so desperately bad. It makes me want all these things. It makes me want a Wonder Woman 3 that takes place in modern times and seeing her fight crime in London. It makes me want a Superman movie, a Man of Steel 2 with this new version of Superman, or at least Justice League 2 and 3 that fleshes out his character and maybe him earning back the red and blue suit eventually. And having all these things, getting to see Clark Kent's second chance and what that means for that character and what that means for Superman. All these things is what I want, and I really don't know if we were ever going to get it, but there is hope because we got this movie. This movie exists, and I watched it, all 4 glorious hours of it, the musical score and everything, the whole entire thing of it was real. It's here. I watched it, and I want more from it, and I really, really hope that Warner Brothers decides to pull the trigger on all of this and spark it back up and just lets it all loose and get to see where this goes, because you really just need a few more movies to wrap all this up. And I think that's possible. I think they could really make money off of it. So that is my review, spoiler heavy talk for Zack Snyder's Justice League. This was a long one, guys. I enjoy talking about every little aspect of this movie, from all the characters to the overall story to the future of this whole nightmare sequence. There's a lot of stuff in this movie that I absolutely adored. So thanks, guys, for watching. Definitely comment down below what you guys thought of Zack Snyder's Justice League. All these things. I didn't even talk about Martian Manhunter. I thought all that stuff was interesting. I do like the actor that they have for it, being I think it was Swanwick from Man of Steel. I think that's very interesting. It's a very small aspect of it, so I didn't talk about that much. But there's a lot of things that I may have missed in this review, so comment down below, ask me questions. What did you guys think of it? If you want me to elaborate on anything else that I've said, definitely comment down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the channel to see a lot more reviews. Falcon and the Winter Soldier comes out in 30 minutes, and I didn't think I'd be up this late, and maybe I will watch it, maybe I will review it for tomorrow, or maybe it'll be another day. But thanks, guys, for watching this video, and I hope to see you all in my next review.